Have you ever wondered what lingers behind the rusted bars of America's most haunted prisons? These aren't just old buildings with dark histories, they're filled with chilling whispers, cold touches, and restless spirits that never left. From ghostly inmates to unexplained screams in the night, these are 5 terrifying true stories from real haunted prisons across the USA. Witness what guards, visitors, and investigators have experienced firsthand. But be warned, some places don't want you to leave. Hit play and step inside if you dare. Just don't be surprised if something follows you back. If you enjoy haunted stories like these, don't forget to subscribe. There are many more chilling tales coming soon. One Eastern State Penitentiary, Pennsylvania. In 1992, a maintenance worker named Gary Johnson was assigned to repair an old lock in cell block 4 at Eastern State Penitentiary. As he began working, he suddenly felt an intense chill sweep through the cell, followed by a crushing sense of dread. He reported that the air around him thickened, and a powerful invisible force gripped his body. Terrified, Gary tried to move, but it felt like something was holding him down. Then, out of nowhere, he saw what he described as a shadowy figure, part human, part mist, emerge from the back wall and stare at him with glowing eyes. The figure didn't speak, but Gary heard whispers all around him, hundreds of voices, angry, crying, and unintelligible. In a panic, he dropped his tools and ran from the cell, vowing never to return. This wasn't an isolated experience. Over the years, multiple guards, visitors, and paranormal investigators have reported similar sightings in cell block 4. Some described hearing phantom footsteps pacing in empty corridors, doors slamming on their own, and ghostly faces peering through the tiny windows of locked cells. One tourist fainted after claiming she felt someone breathing on her neck, though no one else was there. Paranormal teams have captured EVP's unexplained screams, growls, and even a voice saying, "Get out," recorded late at night. Despite its decaying walls, the energy in the prison feels alive, heavy with the pain and rage of those who died within. Many believe that Eastern State's harsh punishments and isolation drove some inmates to madness, and their spirits never left. To Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, California. In 1946, a prisoner in Alcatraz's notorious D block, specifically cell 14D, began screaming in the middle of the night, claiming that something with glowing eyes was in the cell with him. Guards initially dismissed it as paranoia, but his screams continued for hours, desperate and terrified. The next morning, he was found dead with strange marks around his throat, as if he had been strangled, yet no one had entered the cell. Officially, the cause was listed as asphyxiation, but even the guards admit, there was no logical explanation. Some whispered that he had been killed by the ghost of a former inmate known for his violent outbursts, who had once died mysteriously in the same block years earlier. Decades later, tourists and staff alike have reported cold spots, sudden feelings of panic, and the sound of chains dragging across the floors in D block, even when the area is sealed off. One park ranger, during a solo night tour check, claimed he heard sobbing from inside 14D. When he opened the door, the room was empty, but his flashlight flickered and a whisper in his ear said, "Don't come back." Paranormal investigators have captured unexplainable EVPs from the same cell, including a low growl and the words, "I'm still here." Those who step into 14D often describe an overwhelming sense of being watched, and many leave visibly shaken. Even skeptics admit that there is something deeply wrong with that part of Alcatraz. For a place built to break men, it seems some of the broken never truly left. 3 West Virginia Penitentiary, West Virginia. In the early 2002, a former corrections officer named Bill Baker returned to West Virginia Penitentiary for a public tour. He had worked there for over a decade and never believed in ghosts, but what he experienced that day changed his mind forever. While walking near the North Wagon Gate, an area where executions were once carried out, he felt a sudden drop in temperature and a sharp pain in his chest. He turned around, thinking someone had poked him, but no one was there. Moments later, he saw a figure in an old prison uniform walking down the corridor. Bill called out, assuming it was part of the tour, but the figure turned and vanished through a solid wall. He left the building visibly pale and refused to enter that section again. Visitors and paranormal investigators have reported countless strange happenings in the same area. Many claim to hear cell doors slamming, whispering voices, and footsteps echoing in the empty hallways. One tourist fainted after claiming a hand had grabbed her ankle during a guided tour, even though no one was near her. The most chilling account came from a night investigation team who captured video footage of a dark shadow darting across death row, followed by an EVP that clearly said, "I was hanged." Staff have also reported that light bulbs unscrew themselves, cold winds pass through closed rooms, and the sound of crying echoes from solitary confinement. The penitentiary's violent past riots, hangings, and stabbings seems to have left an imprint that refuses to fade. Locals say the souls of those who died in rage or fear are still locked inside, and at night their presence is impossible to ignore. 4 Ohio Street 8, Reformatory, Ohio. In 2013, a volunteer tour guide at the Ohio State Reformatory named Mary reported a terrifying experience while closing up the East Wing after a late-night event. As she walked past the old solitary confinement cells, she heard the unmistakable sound of metal clanking, like someone dragging chains across the concrete. Thinking a guest had been left behind, she turned back but found the hall completely empty. Suddenly, one of the cell doors slammed shut behind her with such force it echoed throughout the block. Frozen with fear, she felt a rush of cold air and a hand brush her shoulder. When she turned, there was no one there, only darkness. That night, she quit her volunteer position and refused to return to that wing. Over the years, countless people have had similar encounters inside the reformatory. Paranormal investigators have captured chilling EVPs, including cries for help, demonic laughter, and a clear voice saying, "Don't leave me." Some claim to have seen the apparition of a former inmate staring from the upper tiers, only to vanish when approached. One camera crew documented a shadow figure moving across the chapel balcony when the building was empty. Even staff who work there daily admit certain rooms feel wrong, as if someone is always watching. The prison's violent history, including suicides, murders, and decades of isolation, seems to echo in every corner of the building. Many believe the spirits trapped inside are those of inmates who died with unfinished business or deep resentment. No matter how many times people try to explain it away, what happens inside those walls can't be ignored, and those who felt it carry the memory forever. 5 Old Idaho Street 8 Penitentiary, Idaho. In 2007, a former corrections trainee named Josh visited the old Idaho State Penitentiary during a historical tour. As he wandered alone into the solitary confinement wing, he immediately noticed a sharp drop in temperature and a sense of overwhelming sadness. He entered one of the isolation cells and stood silently, trying to imagine what it must have felt like for the inmates. Suddenly, he heard heavy breathing behind him. When he turned around, the cell was still empty, but the breathing grew louder. Moments later, he felt what he described as ice-cold fingers wrap around his wrist and pull him back. Panicked, he ran out of the cell and found visible red marks on his arm, as if someone had grabbed him with force. Shaken and pale, he left the tour early and later shared his experience online, warning others never to go alone into that part of the prison. Visitors continue to report eerie activity in that same solitary wing. Many describe hearing whispers, footsteps, or someone calling their name from empty cells. Some say they've seen a man in an old prison uniform walking down the corridor, only to disappear through the wall. Paranormal investigators who've spent the night have captured strange voices on audio, including one that said, "Still here," and another whispering, "Help me." The prison's long history of violence, escape attempts, and punishment seems to have left a deep spiritual scar. Even skeptics admit there's a heavy, unshakable energy in certain areas, especially where inmates suffered the most. For those who have dared to enter alone, the experience is never forgotten.